What's up guys, this is going to be Rezzard The Undead Lord's deck profile. This is a very interesting deck that took a lot of testing to get down before I felt really comfortable with how it plays. It introduces a new mechanic known as Stealth, which has to do with the chance standby area, and I'll be kind of describing those as well. I have a really good amount of them actually. I tried using a build that didn't use as much, but then I realized I can kind of work to make them consistent, so I kind of work towards that angle while taking advantage of Rezzard's mill ability, which I'll get into as well. So let me hop into the list and show you guys what I got going. So starting off with his ruler form itself, we have Rezzard The Undead Lord. He J activates for 2 dark, and you can pay 2 dark to put the top 2 cards of your main deck into your graveyard. I love that this effect isn't once per turn, because later on in the mid turns, when you're not doing so much and you're just trying to set up your J activate, it's really easy to get a bunch of cards in the graveyard without really taking in too much damage, because there is a decent amount of blockers and searchable removal I have in this deck. It's also really nice that you can control their hand very often with this deck. On his J-Ruler side, we have Rezzard the Desecrating Vampire. He has Imperishable, which is really nice because he only has 5/5 for stats. When he enters your field, you may put up to 2 cards from your hand into your chance standby area face down. That's of course where the stealth mechanic comes in, where I'll come into later. He gains 200 for each card in your chance standby area, so with those two, he would be 9/9, which is right outside of Flame of the Outer Worlds range. And then his God ability costs 6, it's 2 dark and 4 colorless, and you can remove any number of Resonators in your graveyard from the game, and for each card removed this way, each player banishes a Resonator and discards a card. So that's, if for every 1 Resonator, you would discard 1 and banish a card. So essentially, he becomes a massive Soulhunt, and it's not so bad because you can, if your graveyard is kind of what you use to play, or your chance standby area is what you use to come back, it's not so hard to just dump their whole hand, and now while they're top decking and maybe looking to use their J-Ruler to try to make a comeback, you can just get an established board using your chance standby area and your graveyard. So it's extremely nice to just waste all their resources and then just go in for a really well established board, and then they can't respond to it. So Rezzard's been really great. I love playing this deck. The stone lineup I think is actually really different from what most people have too, and I'll get into that right now. So I wanted to really think through what colors I wanted to use. A lot of Rezzard decks right now are using red-black because they want all the removal, but I figured with his God ability and a lot of the hand control, you don't really need a lot of spot removal. So I actually decided to go dark green. I have one Grusbelesta because this should be always ran in any deck that has dark stones. It's just amazing, and it offers removal for great cards like Persephone and stuff. You can remove those Familiar of Holy Winds, anything with just 2/2 as a stat. Even if they maybe have 4/4, and you can double up on this where once during the draw and then once after. It's really nice to know that you have removal outside of cards from your hand, because like I said, you exhaust not only their resources, but sometimes you can exhaust yours as well, and you need to be able to use what's remaining of your resources to get your grave going or your chance standbys going. So if you can have removal in the form of a stone and not in an actual card like Thunder or something, it actually benefits you a lot more because you're not milling those cards, or you're not having them in your hand waiting for you to have kind of a use for them. You can just discard your hand with cards like Soulhunt and then benefit from what you discard. So I think that's kind of a better way to kind of go for the deck in general. I think if you think about it, his God ability removing every card off the field essentially, and every single card from each person's hand, that's almost like if you had Thunders for spot removal, or if you had Flames for certain stuff as well. So sometimes it's hard to respond to their J-Ruler, but I kind of have an answer for that as well. And then the side deck is actually really heavy removal too, just in case I do end up needing it. And then so there's the 4 Black Silence, and then the 5 Darkness Magic Stone. I was not only afraid of split, but the deck is actually extremely tight, and I couldn't really find any way to fit any other colors in here. I did want to use Guinevere's at one point because I thought the discard effect, excuse me, I thought the discard effect would be really useful, but I couldn't really fit her inside, and I didn't want to use red just for one card, so I ended up siding her because I do have a Blazer sided. And then the green is very versatile in this deck. I'm actually just going to explain as I go in the Resonators and the spells, because there's no real point of just showing it now. So let me just go through to the Resonators. So like I mentioned, I built a deck thinking in mind that I would want to thin out my deck as much as possible, and so I avoid hitting certain cards with this mill effect that I might need. I run 4 Familiar of Holy Wind as my only 1-drop. This card is actually amazing in this deck because it lets me spot removal stuff like Gretel, because I do have a lot of spells, especially stuff like Spiral and Soulhunt. And having those cake zoned with a Gretel is just devastating because not only do they stop my card, but they also draw. So this can get rid of Gretels with its effect so that way if they do cake zone, they're still, at least losing just the cake zone and not drawing a card as well. So I just really like Familiar. It also nets me a draw on Enter, which is really great because it just helps me thin out my deck and search for those sites that I actually need. For Lora, this is my only 2-drop. On Enter, Lora searches your main deck for a Vampire Resonator. This could be herself or it could be Carmilla. There's actually one other target in it as well, but I'll talk with those as much as I go. Lora kind of plays a double role in this deck actually, because you need Resonators in the graveyard for Rezzard's effect as well as for Arthur, which I'll get into as well later. She kind of keeps searching copies of herself, which every time you block or if they remove her with like Thunder or something, you're getting that extra copy of a Resonator in your graveyard. So she kind of plays the role of being able to search out removal in Carmilla, a stealth card which I have one of, which is the Undead Lord Herald, and she also gets copies of herself to fill up your graveyard. So she's actually a really good asset to this deck, and I didn't think about it at first because I didn't really feel as though I might mill these and it would suck. But with 4 copies, I'm almost always opening with one if I mulligan correctly anyway, so she just thins out the deck of more Loras, which means I'm less likely to hit them with this mill effect. And then 3 Oz. Oz is the main reason why I ran green in general, and of course has stuff like Familiar and stuff as well, but Soulhunt is an extremely powerful card. A lot of people that have been watching my videos for a while, when I went to Anime Expo, I played this kind of Persona Grim deck that could side into Abdul and Alice, and as well as like Dracula and some other stuff. But my argument for Alice at first, for the original Alice ruler, was the fact that you can pay the 1 dark and 1 red to enter your field and blow up a card for 1,000 damage and discard a card from their hand really makes up going second. I think generally this game has a really good curve if you go second. It's not so awful if you side deck correctly, but going first does kind of give you a little bit of too much advantage, I feel, at times. Sometimes when I'm going second, I'm really worried depending on what deck I'm going against, especially if it's like a Vlad and they open like Elvish Priest. But what I've noticed is Soulhunt is kind of like what Alice was, because if I'm going second and I just tap from my stone and use Soulhunt, I remove the Resonator they just played and a card from their hand, and of course I don't have to banish a Resonator because I don't control one. I would just have to discard a card, which I can possibly benefit from later, because that's kind of what the whole point of the deck is. And so you use Soulhunt. Let's say they're using a deck that maybe opened with Elvish Priest or whatever, Cheshire, drew 2 cards, stacked 1, played like 2 Regalias, like it's a Valentina deck. They play like, let's say, Glepnir and something else, or whatever you have. Alice plays, Leviathan and Deep Blue, and churns. They now have like 2 cards in hand and Cheshire on the field, and if you just open Soulhunt, they're going to be down to 1 card in hand and no field. So Soulhunt in general is just a really powerful card, and Oz can let me search it just for free. And whether that's mid-game or really early, well, of course he costs 3, so it'd be, by turn 3, but I have a lot of copies of Soulhunt anyway, so I might see it in my opening hand. But Soulhunt is just a really powerful card in general if you use it really correctly, and I think that having it searchable is just ridiculous. It also lets me use Merlin, which is one of the stealth cards, which I'll also get into later, but just keep in mind that Soulhunt is searchable. 3 Carmilla. This is just spot removal, of course. She destroys anything on enter that's not a vampire. I didn't have any removal in forms of stoning or outside of Soulhunt and spirals, which I'll get into spiral and actually get to it too, of why I actually kind of consider it removal. But Carmilla has been really great. She's an 8/8 body. She's actually a really good target to revive with Persephone too, which once again I'll get into later. I know I keep saying that, but I just want you guys to hear it now so that when you see the card later on, it kind of clicks and makes sense. But having spot removal in the form of an 8/8 body is actually just amazing. And then 3 Arthur, the Dead Lord of Vengeance. I actually really hated this card when I first saw it, because I always thought, why drop this if I can drop Mephistopheles for the same cost? And he's just, a powerhouse. But this deck actually doesn't use any Mephistopheles, and there's actually a really good reason for it. I didn't like using Persephone to revive Mephistopheles, because then on my turn, since most likely when I use the God Art we both get exhausted resources, it really sucked to have to banish the Persephone I have, or whatever I might have to summon. Like, if I go Persephone, she brings out Meph. even if I add an Archer to my hand and drop it, I'm still going to have to tribute one of those on my turn. So I didn't really like how he was just removing my field. I already do that enough with Soulhunt and stuff, and even though it benefits me, sometimes it could feel too much. So I figured with Arthur, if I double up on them on the field, it's -4/-4 to everything, so it really puts a hinder on what they can summon. A lot of decks now are playing Cheshires and Familiars, and it kills them. Of course, this would kill my Familiars too, but I'm fine with getting it in the graveyard because it's just a target for another Arthur copy to banish and add to my hand. For anyone who doesn't know, Arthur makes all other Darkness Resonators gain 2/2, including the ones your opponent has, and all non-Darkness Resonators gain -2/-2, so it would kill my Familiars as well. But he also has a last effect, which is you can remove 3 Resonators in your graveyard from the game and put them from your graveyard into your hand. So using Soul Hunt in a situation like I explained where it's turn, I'm going second, they went, Cheshire 2, Regalia's 2 in hand. You would just play Soul Hunt, they'd get rid of the Cheshire, discard a card, and I just pitch Arthur, and then later on I'm going to bring him back. And it's very important also to note that with Rezzard, the amount of cards you want to be in your graveyard before you J-activate is around 13. You want to be able to either banish 3 to add Arthur to your hand and still have 10, because 10 is a very soft number you need for Persephone. And you also want to either do that with the Scythe as well. If you can have a Scythe and Arthur in the graveyard and 16 cards, well, I guess 18 because those cards are being removed as well. I should say 11 is a soft number then. But if you have around 18 cards in the graveyard, which is actually really easy with this deck, you can mill so quickly that it's not, you would add the Arthur and Scythe to your hand, of course, by banishing 3 cards each, and then still have 10 left. So that's kind of where Arthur's role comes into the deck. It's just really great. I often don't revive him with Persephone if I don't have to. I'd rather go into something like a Carmilla and then add Arthur to my hand and play it. And then you have a 9/9 Persephone, a 10/10 Carmilla, and a 10/10 Arthur. And unless I can do 2 Arthurs, then of course I'd go with that play. But so he's just really great discard fodder and just adds so much to the deck. And then moving on to the stealth cards, I have a Herald of the Undead Lord. She's just a 5/5, and her stealth activate is literally just if you control Rezzard. So the way you use these cards is you put them in your chance standby area by paying 2, and then at any point you meet the requirement, you can flip it and it just becomes a Resonator on the field. So why I run this is because she's mainly a vampire, and I can search it with Lora. So if it's kind of like around turn 4 or 5, and I know I'm going to try to use the God ability by turn 6, well, turn 7 I guess I should say, because I want 6 stones in total to be able to do it. You could do it earlier if you have more sites, but in general, you want to get 2 sites, 16 cards in the graveyard, and maybe possibly search out one of these. It's not mandatory, I just ran one just in case, but essentially, you want to have access to this so that he gets powered up, and it's also not bad early game because I run one of this, you don't see it as often. And there's a lot of Merlins and stuff that people might want to think that they have to be careful for. So if you set this early game and they attack with something, you can just easily go enter because I have Rezzard and block, and you just take out their card, and they think like, oh, he must have a Merlin. Merlin has a different trigger requirement, so I have time to be a little aggressive. And if they try to attack with something that's a little bit weaker than this, you just get free destruction. So one of this is great because I can search it, and I want to be able to set it up for Rezzard if I J-activate, so I just decided just one would totally be fine. And Underground Dragger. Underground Dragger is really interesting. It's, I guess, my least favorite stealth Resonator, but I kind of have a love-hate relationship with this card because it does kind of clutch in a lot of the time, so I figured I'd just run one. It's this one requires you to also have a Darkness Magic Stone. Most of the stealth cards do, except for this one that I've seen so far, but if you, essentially, whenever this card enters your field from your chance standby area, it's destroy target Resonator your opponent controls that dealt damage, and the requirement for him to do this is that I control a Darkness Resonator, and a Resonator was put into the graveyard this turn. So essentially, if I block with the Familiar Wind and it dies, and you essentially did damage and my card died, so I went to the graveyard, I could just flip this and kill the Resonator that killed Familiar. So it's kind of like a crime and punishment, I guess, but with a heftier cost because it would cost 2 to set it. But you get a 7/7 body too, so I think that's kind of a fair trade. It's also nice that it just guarantee destroys it over just dealing damage the way Crime and Punishment does, because then they can't try to buff it to escape the destruction. They would have to use like Untargetable or something, and then in that case you still get a 7/7 body. So I don't think it's a horrible card. I'm still testing it, but I've liked it so far. And then I have 3 Merlins. Merlin's actually also one of the amazing cards in this deck. It's you set it by paying 2, and its requirement to flip is that your opponent discarded a card, which of course they do a lot with Soulhunt and Spiral. And what it does is on enter, a Resonator they control gets a -7/7 until end of turn. So why this is actually so great is, let's say you're going as the Rush deck and you have a Merlin, and they have a field of, let's say, a Guinevere and a Lancelot, or let's say anything in a Lancelot that maybe isn't Guinevere. Another beat stick, let's say, maybe Hunter in the Black Forest. So you use Soul Hunt with Merlin in your stealth standby area, and they would of course tribute the Hunter in Black Forest, because you're like, okay, well, if I get to pick what card I banish, I'm not going to kill my Lancelot, I'll kill my Hunter. And so they destroy Hunter and discard a card, and you, of course, if you don't have any Resonators, you don't have to banish anything, and you just discard a card. And then you flip Merlin, and it kills Lancelot. So it kind of makes up for the fact that Soul Hunt lets them pick what they want to destroy. They're always going to go with their weakest monster, and then Merlin will take care of whatever's stronger. And then you get a 6/6 in the kind of trade-off. So I really like Merlin. I wouldn't run this many copies of him, but because Soul Hunt is searchable by Oz, I just found this amazing. I wanted to have access with setting this also with Rezzard on J-Activate, because if it's this in Persephone, I know that I can kind of come back next turn if I do draw into like an Oz or draw into a Soul Hunt or whatever I'm kind of searching for that my deck didn't for really quickly. I can easily just flip a Merlin and have another form of destruction on the field, and it's just nice to know that I can just remove a bunch of stuff with him while getting a body in the return. And then lastly, 3 Persephone. This is the last Resonator. Persephone is amazing too, because it's your J-Ruler has to be Rezzard to do this effect, and you have to have 10 cards in your chance standby area, in your graveyard. But what she does is, if you do have 10 cards in your graveyard, and she's in your chance standby area, which is of course just face down, and once again, this cost is only if you want to hardcast it. Just setting any of these costs 2. And mind you that the new CR reads that if you meet a requirement for a chance standby stealth card specifically, like any of these, you can flip it the same turn you set it. So essentially, if you have 10 cards, you can set it for 2 and then flip it right away and get just a free card, and you wouldn't have to pay the 4. So what Persephone does is on enter, you revive any card from your graveyard that's cost 4 or less. And it's really great because King Arthur is one of those cards, as well as like Carmilla. And so if you have a lot of cards, like I said, and you want to go Persephone, grab Carmilla, and then add Arthur to your hand and hardcast Arthur, that would be 3 Resonators just instantly at the cost of like 6 in total, which seems hefty, but it's really not when you've exhausted your resources. You're both just top decking. Most of the time your stones are just totally left open, and whatever they summon, they also have to be careful, because if you J-activate it and use your God ability, and your field is even just Persephone because you flipped her after, and let's say Arthur and Rezzard, because you have the Deathscythe and they make it so that he steals a Resonator that he does damage to and kills, if you're swinging for big amounts with Rezzard and they're top decking for Resonators as blockers, they're most likely not going to want to block with those Resonators because you're going to steal them. So you get free damage in with Rezzard. So Persephone just makes up for the fact that your field gets really empty quick because of the God ability. So you banish your whole hand, you banish your whole field, they do the same. On enter, you had set, let's say, Persephone and Herald of the Undead Lord, and then you go, okay, flip Persephone, she enters the field, puts Arthur in the field, flip Herald of the Undead Lord, you now have a 7/7 Undead Lord, a 9/9 Persephone, and a 10/10 Arthur. And if they top deck into something like a Familiar or a Cheshire Cat, it's going to die to Arthur the second they summon it. So the deck actually works really well. You just have to be very careful with where you thin and where you try to pull these certain combos off of, because it can get to the point where if you play it incorrectly, you're just going to have inconsistent hands. It's also very important to note that why I like this specific number of stealth cards is there's 8 of them in general, which is essentially a fifth of my deck. And if I mill these, it's totally fine, because sometimes I don't want to remove certain cards from my graveyard for Arthur, just because, I don't know, like I like having the targets for Persephone. And if I have, a Persephone and there is another Persephone in the graveyard, and I know there's no benefit from pulling her out, I could just banish the additional copies of my stealth cards for Arthur's effect, and then kind of use them for that while still holding on to the Loras in my hand that could thin out more Loras from the deck, instead of, milling more and maybe possibly milling something I wouldn't want to mill. So the stealth cards not only are great because of how they work in the chance standby area, but you can kind of banish them for your graveyard effects without really feeling guilty about it, because there's no way to get them back anyway. Moving on to the spells, I have for Deathscythe, the Life Reaper. Why this card is so great is because not only do you get 2/2 when you tap it, not only does your opponent stop from getting Imperishable and Swiftness, which is really good against aggro decks, but if your J-Ruler is actually Rezzard, this card makes his God ability cost 1 less, which means if you tap one of these during, well, if you have 2 of them on the field, and you tap both of them during your draw, untap and then recover and do it again, you can only pay 2 for his God Art, which is really ridiculous because it's such a powerful God Art. So the whole goal is to try to get to 2 of these. I tried using light at one point for Persephone, but it didn't seem right. I found it a lot easier to just excessively mill through my deck to hit these in the graveyard and then use the effect to banish and put them in my hand. Or sometimes just because I am using Loras and Oz's and all these cards that kind of thin my deck out, I tend to just draw into these normally just on my own as well. So the whole goal is to at least get to 2 of them. That's kind of like the dream number. You could just have 1 and do it for 4, but it's a lot better when you can only pay 2 for it, because if you do have 6 stones, you can deactivate and pay the 2, and you'd still have 2 open just in case you need something, which I'll kind of get into too, because having 1 green open is actually really good in this deck. I'll get into why that's important right now, but the 3 Soulhunts I said, I would run 4, but because I have Oz to search this out, it's not such a big deal. There is also another target for Oz, which I'll get to right after I the 4 Spirals. Spiral is just really good because you discard 2 cards out of their hand. If you're kind of already controlling their hand and they're top decking and using the 1 card they have every turn, and these are kind of dead in your hand, you can always just use it as discard fodder for Soulhunt, and then you can banish Soulhunt and Spiral to return Scythe to your hand. Please remember that if you are banishing cards for Scythe to add it to your hand, make sure you normally pick spells, because Arthur is the one that specifically hits creatures. You also don't want to remove creatures that you could essentially revive with Persephone, so it's just always better to use spells to remove to add Scythe to your hand. 2 Rapid Growth. This is the other card that Oz can search. I almost never really search this out with Oz, but I have it in there just in case. Why Rapid Growth is so awesome is because it's a remnant. It lets you play from the graveyard as if it was from your hand, and then it gets banished after you do. But it says target J Resonator you gain controls 4/4. So if you mill these really early or discard it with Soul Hunt, it can kind of be forgotten about. And then in a situation where you're using Rezzard to attack, and let's say you have 1 site that you use during your draw and then after recovery, so he's at a 9/9, and they have something even crazy like, let's say, a Purple Mist, and they're just like, you know, I'm going to block with my Purple Mist. It's something that generally doesn't have, you can't target it, so there's no other way to get it over it instead of forcing it to block or attacking into it. And then they just block with something stronger. You can use Rapid Growth from the graveyard to give him 400 attack and defense, and then he would kill it, and then he would steal the Purple Mist because of the Scythe's effect. So the fact that the Scythe lets him just take Resonators when he does damage and kills them is just ridiculous with Rapid Growth, because it makes up for his poor stats. So it always makes people think that he's too weak and that you're just trying to maybe get some damage in or something, or maybe they'll try to think you're trying to force them into blocking with the lower Resonator just to steal the small one. So they might just, you know, risk blocking with the big one, and then you'll buff it up and protect it. And if they don't check your grave, they're essentially just going to lose a Resonator. And in this situation, if you're attacking for, let's say, 900 because you tap the side twice, and they see that you have Rapid Growth, they might just not block at all because they're scared you'll use it, so you're still getting free damage in. So there's just so much that this card does. It like applies fear, and it just puts so much pressure, and I just love using it. And then 1 Keen Sense. Keen Sense is just good because it counters spells. I don't really use, I've never seen anyone use a Chance Standby effect. Maybe if I was playing this deck and they were using Keen Sense, they would, but it kind of feels like a minus, because if they do it on something like, let's say, a Persephone, and you do have 10 cards, you would just flip it in response and get the effect. So it only stops like Merlin if they use Spiral and you try to destroy Merlin. But in that case, you might as well just negate the Spiral with Keen Sense. So I've never really seen that effect come into handy, but I mean, it's still better than Cake Zone, because just in case, I don't have Geralt, so I won't draw anyway. And then 1 Xeex. This is actually mainly because I like the option to shuffle my graveyard. A lot of people see that as like a counter to this deck, but I actually think it benefits me. If somebody was to Xeex my graveyard and I have a Scythe and an Arthur in there, I would just use it to my advantage to banish 3 spells that I might not want to reuse. Let's say if, you know, they're top decking and they top deck a Xeex and they want to stop my graveyard and they use that Xeex on my graveyard, I'll just banish like a Soul Hunt, a Spiral, or 2 Soul Hunts and a Spirals, because I can't really use them anymore. Maybe just Spirals, because Soul Hunt isn't so bad for removal. But you essentially just banish the spells you don't want shuffled back, and then Resonators you don't want shuffled back, like maybe another Merlin and stuff because you're not going to be using them. Add those 2 cards to your hand, and then your deck gets shuffled and you can use it again. So not only in my deck can I use this as a counter, but I actually much rather just control what cards get removed from my graveyard, leave only the really good ones in there, and then shuffle it back, and then now my whole deck is full of good cards again. So it's actually underestimated. Like, a lot of people can think that they're stopping you by shuffling your deck, which they can if they do it early enough, but it's so much easier for you to keep milling rather is for them to keep shuffling it in, so it's never really been a problem. Lastly, for the side deck, I have a Blazer Gill Rabus. This is of course just in here because I already mained the Deathscythe, so having access to this is amazing against stuff like Melgus, Kane, and Bahamut. I was going to side a Dracula as well, but I just didn't really see the need for it because I didn't think it went too well with the deck. The idea is that if you do go into Blazer, I would take out all the chance standby cards, maybe keep in Merlins and stuff like that, but like Persephone and the Undead Lord and stuff would go for sure. I have Guinevere's for to help keep discarding Arthur and stuff because, like I said, I wanted to play it, but I didn't want to fit the red, and this kind of makes it perfect. 4 Thunders for spot removal if I need it. 3 Flame of the Outer World. Like I said, my side deck is just a bunch of Resonator hate. I just in case, because my main deck doesn't have any 2 Stony Deaths, I want to make sure I have it in the side at least, and 2 Dark Pulse. This is literally just all removal. I don't have any redstone, so if they do kill my Blazer, I might be in trouble because I'd lose the ability to have red for Flame, Thunder, and Guinevere. But I'm pretty certain that if I play the deck correctly and I use Spirals and Soulhunt and just control their hand, that they're most likely not going to be able to. I'm still going to be able to out resource their resource, because I just can use my grave. So if I can essentially waste their resources and they're stuck on just their J-Ruler and they have to flip their J-Ruler and then I flip Blazer and kill that too, at that point if they are top decking and taking out my Blazer and I have just stuff like Carmillas with really big bodies taking out what's left of their Resonators or Arthurs just that are just recurring and stacking on my field, making it so that all the Resonators that are low just keep dying, I'm not too worried about missing out on the black anyway. So I can always, on the red, I can just keep discarding the red for Soulhunt or anything like that. So it doesn't have enough red for me to actually worry about what will happen if Blazer dies. I just feel totally comfortable that if you play it correctly and you just exhaust their resource, that they'll be stuck on their J-Ruler and then you take out their J-Ruler and you just essentially have game. So that's the side deck. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed my detailed version of my Rezzard deck profile. I really wanted to make sure I explained this deck super thoroughly because it is one of the more complicated decks to play. Like I said, it was really hard for me to come up with this build. I tried dark blue, dark light, dark red. I literally tried everything until I hit this one, and I genuinely think this one is probably the best one. Not the best deck out there, but just the best one that I personally tried. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say, so if you do have any suggestions or think of how I can incorporate more cards that work from the graveyard or something like that, I'd love to know what ideas you guys can bring, so leave it in the comments below. And if you guys haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do, because I actually know the schedule for the rest of the week. Tomorrow will be Alice Valkyrie, Wednesday will be Blazer, Thursday will be the Saint Alice, and then Friday will be Persea. I would love to do Persea earlier, but I still don't have one and don't really have the funds to grab one yet, so I'm kind of waiting on maybe getting paid in the middle of the week or something to be able to just buy myself a Persea, because I didn't pull one out of 6 boxes, which I think is crazy. The stamped Faria curse got me, so I got like 2 of those and a bunch of regular ones, but no actual Perseas, so I have to still grab one of those, so that'll just come Friday. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about the whole deck profile, about anything you guys have any questions for. Typically also, just a quick note, if you guys do want to send me a message, my Facebook link is in the description below. I'd much rather you send me a message or leave a comment in this video, but don't send a YouTube message, because I'm quite often on mobile, and YouTube's messaging on mobile is just impossible. You literally, it sends you an email asking you to respond to the message, and then when you click on messages, it takes you to a channel named messages. It's not even like your actual folder in your account, it's a channel named messages. So I don't know what they were thinking with that. I don't know if it's somebody thought of a weird hyperlink thing they could do where it refers you there instead. I really don't know how any of that works, but messaging on mobile is impossible. So please either leave a comment in the comment box for the video or send me a message on Facebook. Avoid using YouTube messages, and yeah, so I'd rather connect with you guys that way if that's okay with you guys. And I will of course catch you guys next time.